Hi everyone, welcome back to SheriaClinic. Today we'll be talking about data protection for SMEs and startups. The topic is compliance without breaking the bank. We have done 2 other sessions of data protection. We have 2 episodes. We have one by Rogers Mwangi that was done years back, I guess 2021. And then we have a recent one by Vanessa Sifunjo that was done just a few days ago. So I'm joined by my well-able co-host and presenter today. Her name is Georgina Giathi. Before I let her introduce herself, let me just do the honors to show you a bit of her profile. So she's a very serious lady, yeah. In as much as anyway, let's get into it. So she's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. She's also the senior partner of Giathi and Company Advocates. She's a certified mediator, so she's done mediation. You love this one. She's a data protection specialist. She's currently pursuing a professional certificate as a certified information privacy manager, CIPM, from International Association of Privacy Professionals. She is also a data protection officer, a trained data protection officer. In short, a DPO. So she's very well versed with matters data protection. She studied at Quare, Karen, who were neighbors, because I was also in JKUAT Karen. Anyway, that's just, as a by the way. She has also facilitated numerous training sessions for SMEs and corporates, whereby she was focusing on implementing the best practices in data protection compliance. So I'll let her say a few things before we get into the questions. Probably you can just further introduce yourself and what for us to expect.
Thank you for that extensive introduction. I focus on a lot of, I work with a lot of SMEs and focus on compliance in the general sense, but more specifically, data protection, because the entire roadmap is a bit extensive than what most people realize, what most SME owners understand. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my day to day. Aside from that, of course, our law firm carries out other compliance in other areas, and more of commercial transactions and employment matters as well. But today we are focusing on data protection compliance, particularly for SMEs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm glad to have you. A DPO. I think I'll stress on the DPO. Afterwards, you'll have to tell me what someone has to do to be a DPO in Kenya.
Right.
I think you're doing well. I'm glad. So just before we start with the questions, what is cyber hygiene? I've seen it somewhere in your profile.
Cyber hygiene, let me just speak to SMEs specifically. Cyber hygiene is basically how best a business can position themselves in securing the business from, cyber attack. Because we understand we have, there was a recent statistic on that there are over, is it 10 million plus registered businesses in Kenya? So, and most of these businesses, you find that they operate digitally, given that that's where businesses have moved to. That's where most operations are. That's where revenue is, generated. So the more SMEs and the more businesses are accessible through the digital platforms, it also means they are exposed to cyber attacks. So cyber hygiene is basically what best measures a business can take in as far as protecting its revenue generation from an access or from an cyber attack by a third party.
Right. Thank you. I've now understood it.
Yeah.
So we can go to the questions.
Okay.
I would love to know why should SMEs and startups in Kenya care about data protection? I hear people say it's the new currency, it's the new gold. So why would they care about them? Yeah.
Data I would say is oil. What I would say is currency for SMEs in Kenya. When we're speaking to the geographical context in Kenya is trust, customer trust is digital currency for small and medium businesses and enterprises in Kenya presently, because I mean, like I've mentioned prior that most business right now operate digitally. Before, and I think also with what happened with COVID, more and more businesses were exposed to adopting a new way of conducting business and generating revenue. More businesses you may find that they may not even have physical offices. I'm talking about the micro enterprises, and if they do, they have to establish their digital presence first. I think that's where more attention is drawn to. So why the showcase? Because as long as you're handling data, right? Because as long as you're operating digitally, what you're using to run your day-to-day operation of your business, what you're using to generate your income as an enterprise owner is data. And that looks different for different businesses across different sectors. That looks different for a manufacturing company, for example. That looks different for a player in the banking sector, in the health sector. That looks different across the board. But what is constant is that data is actually the digital currency for SMEs. Because at the end of the day, it's about customer trust. And that is, again, the basis for most businesses across the board. So if a customer cannot trust you with their personal information, and it's good that more and more people are becoming more aware of privacy as a right. So the more people get to understand this, and what you're handling and trading with is data, and customers cannot entrust you as a business with their own personal information, then that would encroach on their trust towards the services you offer as a business or towards the products that you do give.
Right. So, Georgina, please tell us, what are the key data protection obligations that SMEs and startups must comply with in this day and era of data protection and all that?
So, like I mentioned before, it's an entire roadmap. It mostly does begin with, of course, registration. But even before then, before you proceed to register with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, what you need to ask yourself as an SME owner is, what information am I processing? What data am I processing? That's where you start from, right? You follow the data. So what information am I processing? Who is handling that information? Are you collecting it digitally, like through your website as a business? Is it manually done, as it is, as you find maybe in like hospitals or most entities or facilities that you find? To access any premise, most people have that, the big black book where you have to write down your name, that's personal information. So you have to look at, you follow the data right from the collection to its processing, to its storage or its transfer,
and to its deletion or erasure.
Deletion, right? Yeah, but that's at the very tail end of the whole data cycle. So the key place to start would be first identifying that, because having a record of that will even inform you as an entity owner when he gets to the registration bit.
Probably for our viewers, you can tell us what is the difference between a data handler, data processor, and all that, because maybe
I would say the general term for it is for any entity or any person or any individual that handles information. The general term is data handler. But where the difference comes in is where you as an entity, you have control over what is collected and the purpose for which that information you collect is used for, then you would be termed as a data controller. All right. If you have monopoly over how it's collected, processed, stored, used, deleted, and so on. But if you have been engaged either by another company to collect the information or data, their personal information or data on their behalf, then you are a data processor.
Right.
But the standard to which the authority that oversees the handling of personal information in Kenya, that is the ODPC, the standard to which the data controller and the data processor they're held to is the same.
You can now tell us the obligations in depth now for our viewers to also understand.
Right. So just to recall, the data compliance roadmap rather the data protection compliance roadmap, it entails a lot more than the registration bit. So among the other obligations that are required of SME owners is to also consider the grounds for which they are processing personal information. There's several grounds under the Kenya Data Protection Act where as an SME owner can process data. Most SME owners or most micro business owners rely on consent a lot. It's in some instances it's not advisable to just rely alone on consent in processing information, but if a business is relying on consent to process personal information, then it has to be, it has to be an informed consent, informed and unambiguous, right? It has to be specific to purpose, meaning when you have a consent form as a business and you're trying to get your customers to agree to allow you to process information, you have to be very clear on what information you're processing first and foremost, and why you're processing that information. So the other grounds for lawful processing of personal information, there's also legitimate interest. There is performance of contractual obligation. Is question on national security and public interest. Again, now that would play out differently. That would be more so towards perhaps public entities or government parastatals and agencies. But for SMEs, most grounds may apply depending on the situation and the type of SME or the sector that you're in. As an SME is, of course, consent and performance of contractual obligation. Aside from others, there are other grounds where perhaps it's become a whole court case. Now, the another ground then would be to avail that information purposes of defending a legal claim in court, but that's circumstantial. That's on a different circumstance. So the other obligation that SME owners are required is to I mentioned registration, maintaining a record of the processing activity, obtaining consent, especially for I've handled clients who are marketing agencies, and they basically do a lot of web the running of advertisements for example in the digital space, the Google ads, the Facebook ads, and so on. You have to ensure that you have adhered also to the principles. All these things are interconnected. So you have to ensure that if you have measures within your platform as a business, your digital platform, one, if someone gives you consent, they can withdraw it at any time. I mean, and you have the obligation to also inform the customer that in scenario that you do have the right to actually withdraw this consent, and it has to be clear, plain out in for example, when you put in a policy, it has to be very, very clear that because they have a right to information according to the section 26 of the Act, and you have a duty as an SME owner to notify them. That's under section 29 of the same Act. So if you fail to do so, that can render you in the red zone in as far as risk is concerned and data breach. If you also fail to accommodate the data subject requests, we'll get deeper into that. But part of the obligation is to also ensure that if a customer requests for the information, you should be able to give that to them.
Could you give us a real life example?
For example, let's say you have a account in a bank. Let's say, just for context, let's say it's Family Bank.
Yeah, we're not advertising there.
We are not really. Okay, but for context, it's Family Bank. So you're an account holder with Family Bank, and you obtained a loan, for example, and you wish to have that loan transferred to another bank. Or you want to move your funds from that account, let's say to any other DTB bank, for example. You as a customer at the time of Family Bank have the right to request that information migrated from Family Bank to DTB.
And can I also request for Family Bank to delete my information now that I'm no longer their client?
Yes, the same way. I think we shall look into the rights of data subject later on in the discussion. But as a customer, you have a right to be informed. You have a right to have your information erased. That's called the right of erasure. There's a right to even have your information rectified. For example, let's say if you had your names normally for Kenyans, the normal way is that you have 3 names, right?
Yes.
And most of the time your surname is like your father's name or the name accorded to you at birth. But maybe when you get married, you get a new surname most of the time. So if you want now that information reflecting in your accounts, you have the right to request that. Yeah. Through so as an SME owner, how you can look at it is the right of a data subject is an obligation on the data handler, the data controller or processor. Meaning, if a data subject has, or like your customer has the right to information,
Then it's
your obligation to issue that information. Or when you're obtaining consent, for example, if the data subject or customer has a right to, rectification or erasure of their own personal information, then the obligation imposes that you have to ensure that when you get a request from the data subject to delete the information, you should do so. In fact, the Act provides that it has to be done within a specific timeline. If you fail to do so, that can, render you in, monetary problems for the ODPC. We've seen recently we did with a team at the Data Privacy Governance Society of Kenya, did a recent analysis of determinations by the ODPC, and we found that even because we found that there are several companies that were sued perhaps, or a complaint was lodged against them for data breach, and the ground for it was that a customer requests you to delete this information, to delete this image, to delete these account, not to share it to any other party, and then you fail to actually accommodate that request and do the needful, then the repercussion would be that is actually is a breach, and you'd find out the compensations would be levied against you would be to the tune of hundreds of thousands, or in some cases even millions, just for failing to take into consideration and accommodate a data subject's request or a customer request. That's why I'm talking of a data subject's rights or your customer's rights imposes an obligation on you as a business owner.
Yes. Right. Now we know that startups, SMEs, all that have limited resources. Some of them, probably most, have limited resources. So my question would be, what are the cost-effective ways for these startups and SMEs to ensure compliance with the data protection laws and all that?
Right. Your budget is, in fact, for most of the clients I interact with, after because it's fortunate. The good thing is the more and more SME owners actually come to realize that this is actually a need in their company, and it's part of what helps the company flourish in terms of like growth in revenue and so on, because it's can be a tool that can be used by SME owners to increase customer trust in their services and the products that they sell perhaps, and that can generate more and more revenue. So the best way for the SME owners to comply within, I would say, within budget, because budget is relative given the size of our company and so on. I think I would say the first place to start would be a policy.
Okay.
Yeah. A privacy policy is important because, and I'm saying that because it really covers your back as a business owner, because all that we've said before, all that we have stated, identifying yourself as a data controller or processor will be captured in the policy. The kind of information that you process will be captured in the policy. How you handle the security measures that you've put in place to ensure that the information that you've processed and are in storage within your company are captured in that policy. So if you have a basic all all-rounded policy as a business, that would be a good place to start.
Let me interrupt you and ask you, in terms of cost effectiveness of compliance, how much do DPOs charge? You're one of them. So probably I would want to know if I have an SAB or something, because if I'm going to comply, probably I might need a DPO, data protection officer, or
Yeah, okay, it's the act doesn't state that it doesn't state it as a mandatory requirement. It doesn't state that you must have a DPO. It's usually just recommended, just so that you can have, you know, a dedicated department, or in some cases personnel dedicated particularly to compliance with the Data Protection Act.
Okay.
Again, budget looks different for different organizations, right? Of course, you can't compare you know, a multi. How can I call it? A multinational corporation with like a startup, tech startup, for example. You can't compare, you know, an organization that only has just started perhaps in Nairobi, Kenya, vis-a-vis one that already has branches across the continent or across the world. So when you ask on the cost, it's relative to the organization. It's relative to the scope of work that you engage a DPO in. It's also relevant to the budget you have as an institution or as a company. So I may not.
Is it affordable? Maybe
I may not be inclined to give a figure.
Okay.
But what I can say is, if it is affordable, if you look at the bigger picture of what you're trying to save yourself from as a business, because I mean, if you're caught on the wrong side of it, it will cost you not only in you know, implication on as far as your customers' trust is concerned, because you can imagine, I mean, determinations for your DPCs are usually published,
yes,
for the public to see.
Yes.
So
we have seen
several. We've seen several. Yes. You've seen several across different sectors, including even government entities. So I mean, once that information is published, already that does enough financial damage for your business, even before the DPC actually makes a determination and issues maybe an enforcement notice, a fine. So if you look at it in the bigger aspect of it, it's being compliant is actually an enabler for your business. Not being compliant is now the adverse of that.
Right.
Yes, that's how I can answer that question.
Moving on to data privacy policies.
Right.
How would you help SMEs and startups have such a policy, and what is the policy all about? I think you've touched a bit on that.
Yeah. I think a comprehensive privacy policy will, I'll just to recap what I've just said, and maybe just to add on to it, is aside from the, you know, processing activities and what you will handle as a business and the purpose and all that, it also has to come out clearly whether or not you're a registered data handler. I think that should be captured in the policy. It also has to come out also clearly. Are you engaging a third-party company as far as securing of data or personal information is concerned? What I mean is, most businesses you find, as long as you're running a business digitally, most digital platforms right now have a privacy policy already in place, right? If you're using maybe perhaps like cloud security or storage solutions, they have their own privacy policy. So as a business, if you are using third-party vendors or third-party service providers, there's a layered approach to it, meaning a privacy policy of a third party doesn't cover you.
Oh, okay.
As a business owner, you have to have your own privacy policy, and even before you engage the third party service providers, you also have to kind of like fine-tune, combat their policy to ensure that if there's any gap in their policy, it should be well covered and mitigated in yours, such that you are not held liable for breach by a third party. That's what we call that's what we also consider third party risk management.
Wow, I think it's a bit intense, and I think companies really, and SMEs need to have DPOs to be able to break this down?
Yeah, actually, I can give an example. There's a company, I won't mention the name, just so that's data privacy protection. Yeah. But the information is all tech. But okay, it's a company that they published, actually it was a marketing agency that published an image that they obtained from these copyright-free websites. I think the copyright-free website is called pexels.com. So basically, they used the person's image they obtained from pexels.com to promote their own, product, or it's product or services, to promote their business basically, and they made sales out of it. Now, the owner of that image did not go after Pexel. So I believe it was a lady. She went after the company itself.
So, Georgina, what are the common mistakes that SMEs in Kenya make when it comes to data compliance, data protection matters?
Right. The common mistakes that I've noticed from, or when the clients approach me to carry out an audit for them, you find that as you look through the record of their processing activities, find that some of the information they collect they don't need.
Okay.
For example, if it's let's say you're a business selling shoes. Let me go as simple as that. You're a business selling shoes. You don't need you may not really need my email. Right. A telephone contact should be enough. And if you need my email, you need to justify why you need my email. And maybe if you're using that, you're collecting emails perhaps for email marketing and to promote more and more future sales that you may have as a business, fine, but that has to be clear. But for contact purposes, a telephone
number is enough in Kenya.
Yeah, telephone contact is enough. Another example would be, let's say you're going to a hospital. That's another. Hospitals actually SMEs.
They have a lot of our data.
They have a lot of.
Which is what category?
Category is health data is sensitive personal information.
Yeah, which is different from
personal information because it has a different standard. That held to a different standard in handling sensitive personal information. That's one example. Property details in Kenya, I think that's an interesting fact. Property details in Kenya is categorized as a sensitive personal information, meaning if you own some property in, is it Kamulu or Kimuno? Kamulu or someplace in Juja or wherever, the fact that you own, or rather your details as a proprietor for that particular land shouldn't be just accessible to everyone. These land agencies that we have around, they're held. They may not know really, but they are held to a higher standard in handling that, because they do handle. Transacting in land is a day-to-day running of their own agency as a business. So the example I was giving is, if for hospitals, for example, they really don't require your details perhaps of where you stay. My opinion.
Yeah, I also.
Some of the research I've done, you don't require details of where I stay. In fact, right now, I don't understand why we still use postal address.
In this day
and era. We still use Telegram. I've seen that in so many documents. So you write so-and-so, PO box, Telegram number, blah, blah. We don't use Telegram. In fact, right now, even postal address, I don't know, do you use your...
No, I don't. If you can't do it,
your address, you have your telephone number. Some of this information is where I find that more and more SME owners actually handle more data than they need.
Yeah.
And there's a principle in the Act that is categorized as data minimization.
Right.
Meaning you should only collect what you need.
All right.
And to meet the purpose for which you've collected, that is that specific purpose that you need to also inform your customer.
What other mistakes?
What the other mistakes that I see around is they're not transparent. There isn't enough information on their privacy policy. They're not transparent.
Maybe they don't even have.
They don't. No, what I found. What most people have come through my door. They've gone on ChatGPT. they've prompted ChatGPT, I want a privacy policy, either that or they've gone to a random website, like let's say Amazon, and then they've just copy-pasted what they find there. I understand they're trying to, mitigate costs because, getting services does require a budget. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't, if it doesn't fit the operation or the day-to-day running of your business, then you will still land yourself in the same trouble. In fact, between you and one who didn't even bother to get a privacy policy in that manner, there's not much of a difference. You'll still find yourself on the wrong side of the law. Especially with the ODPC with hefty fines.
She is doing a lot. Kudos to her if she watched this video. She's really doing a lot.
Yes. The other thing is just quickly is a number of SME owners also ignore security measures.
In what way?
In the sense of that, if you, let's say, build a website and let's say you've onboarded a third party, cloud security or storage solution, they're not keen on actually finding out or like running this. Usually call it the ethical hacking. In fact, from usually advise businesses, as long as you're setting up your business digitally and maybe you're running an e-commerce, for example, let's say like Jumia or Amazon, it would be, proactive to actually have someone try and hack your platform.
Oh yeah, the ethical hacking.
Such that just to see how strong your security control measures are. Because what I realized is most business owners just leave it to the third, but they really don't. For them, they see as long as things are running and then generating revenue on that platform, whether it's even a website or whatever that trading platform they may use, they're good. But that can land you in problems because if that platform is vulnerable in whichever way, and again, hackers are on the clock, right? There are different types of attacks that businesses are susceptible to, and from ransomware to all types of malware attacks. And if you're not positioning yourself as a business to have strong security controls,
are they called firewalls or what is that?
Firewalls. There are different measures a business can take. You can have the firewalls. Some you may have to get an anti-malware kind of softwares installed and again updated,
like Kaspersky or something.
There's several solutions in the market today, and they keep coming up each and every day. Again, those also require budgets.
Okay, they're not really.
They are short. They're the free version, but you realize that if you engage the paid up versions, they have better coverage for you as a business. Yeah.
So tell us, what are the top cyber security risks for startups handling immense data from clients and customers?
I would say ransomware attacks is a big, or rather malware attacks is a big elephant in the room, and as far as SME owners are concerned, because again,
what is a malware, or how does that attack?
A malware is, in simpler terms, it's a malicious software.
Okay.
Yeah, a malicious software with the intent of course, it all points to access. So it's a malicious software that can be installed with intent of course, access to conduct a malicious attack on your business. Like how else I can put it is, look at it from a point of if someone can actually access anything you may have in your phone right now. Without you authorizing that access.
I think the spying softwares, I don't know, I see them being advertised on. Are they real?
They're very real. It's very real. In fact, you can be hacked through this spyware. You can be hacked through perhaps even like your phone camera. You can be hacked through sometimes some come in the form of like perhaps like files or folders. Once you click
I see them a lot on WhatsApp.
And or those numbers that tell you if you want to make money quickly. I mean, it happens every other day. In the same way you're exposed to it as an individual, imagine how much more you're exposed to it as a business. And there was a recent statistic by the Kenya Communications Authority that actually said that more and more businesses are most accessible to these attacks. And it's unfortunate that in this day and age, it cuts across, regardless of whether you are a hospital,
A bank.
and
I'll talk about it. Yeah, we've seen these cases of banks, people.
even government entities. We've seen these cases. So if you're not proactive, it's never. What I advise business owners to have is a proactive approach, because a reactive one is more costly on you as a business. A proactive approach in setting up these control measures, whether it's a multi-factor authentication measures, have those in place. So it's the security controls and tools that are paid up. Set up that budget and just pay that up, because the cost of not doing so
is heavy. Yeah.
And bouncing back from that takes a lot. And some businesses fail to bounce back from such an attack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably the next question. How can SMEs protect user data when using third-party apps? I think we've talked about the third-party apps like cloud storage or payment gateways. What are payment gateways?
Payment gateways is financial technology startups where you basically issue solutions around how someone can how someone can save money digitally. You have the digital or mobile banking as we know it today. In fact, most banks have adopted that as we know it. Yeah. And other tech startups have issued it as a solution. For example, if you want to transfer money from, Kenya to US,
you can use PayPal.
There's so many other apps that have come right now. That's what is classified as the payment. It's reference to the
payment gateways.
Payment gateways, yeah. And you find that payment gateways, I'm also looking at sectors like the digital credit lenders, the likes of Branch, the likes of Tala.
Yeah.
There are so many coming up as well.
Many here.
So they need to also compare, because like financial data,
can it be classified as a sensitive?
Absolutely, because financial data it requires a higher standard in as far as compliance is concerned. If you look at, for example, a bank and someone selling shoes, right? The kind of financial information a bank handles is different from a shoe supplier. Right. So they're held to a different kind of standard. They're all data handlers, but the procedures that are required for each of them to comply with looks a bit different.
Right. How would an SME handle a data breach? For instance, it has happened, and all the information concerning clients is there. What do we do? Really fast.
First, you contain it. In fact, what I advise, especially with like malware attacks, first contain it and assess it. So, because it spreads. In fact, for malware attacks, it actually spreads. It can affect, for example, if it's a company and you have several devices all looped in, if one device is already compromised, it can quickly make it a whole. It can already quickly shift to all other devices. So if you're able to contain it, the better, and assess it fast.
Then you assess the damage, or what are you assessing?
You assess in assessing, you assess the kind of attack you're dealing with, because each attack looks differently and it manifests differently. It affects different things. Then you also look at the extent of that damage, for example. Then you look at notifying of the data sub. And I think this is where this is where more companies kind of like shy off, because they don't want to look like the bad person who has been hacked and they are trying to. But it's better to inform
rather than finding out.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, it reinforces the trust. And the act actually requires you as a data controller or processor to also notify the ODPC within 72 hours.
Yeah. Those are how many days?
So sure, about, is it 3 days? Yeah. That is not much time. Can you imagine a data
before you even discover the
and you and assess and find out exactly, because even as you notify the DPC, you have to give the notification has to, you have to identify what breach you are handling or you're trying to recover from. Then after notifying the ODPC and your clients, you then mitigate it. That sometimes looks different for different organizations. Some even have cybersecurity experts come in. For example, if it's a cyber attack, sometimes that looks like switching off computers and trying to see how much information has been lost
or leaked. I have there's something very interesting that happened. I don't know if you heard about it. I think it was also it's also in the public domain. So there's, let me call it a dating site or a hookup site, all that. They handle very sensitive information, all that. So I think at some point, I just saw it somewhere, that systems were hacked and data was leaked. And I think someone now saw their husband or wife or blah, 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 do in all that. So I think more businesses should take precaution. Yeah.
Especially
because now I think it was even close. I can't remember the facts, but you can imagine the damage.
end of the
damage. Or even the Guinea, what country is that where Equatorial Guinea thing happened and things leaked and yes.
leaked and it's spiral because once it's in public domain, I mean, we encourage people to actually fact check and don't be a party to misinformation and disinformation. But what is the reality on the ground is that once information is leaked, people just keep sending and sending.
And now they'll screenshot and share and all that.
Yeah, and before you know it, before you've managed to contain it, you already landed at the ODPC. So
right.
It's advisable to that, and that's when notification is important, because if it comes from you and
notifying the client or the
handler first, because then you're even able to reassure your client that this has happened, but we are working on it. You can still continue doing partnering with us as a client and so on and so on. If you're able to actually go ahead of it, it's better than having a reactive measure to it. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add?
What I think I've left out is, after you've identified and assessed and contained it and notified the client and the ODPC, then the next thing is to, of course, now have an incident response team. It's advisable to now look into.
Is it like a disaster management
kind of like, it's just actually it's another word for that. It's just, I guess, it's just in this, industries have different terms for different things, but yeah, a data breach or data breach response team, basically to now look at controls or how best you can salvage perhaps what hasn't been touched, or even recover what has already been disbursed.
Could it be very tricky, because I think the internet never forgets and people download.
Okay, when it depends on the kind of breach. Of course, if it's an issue on image that is not distributed and it's not in public domain and so on, I think now maybe the way to go about that would be approaching a company like Meta, for example, and calling them take down. That can take a bit of time. But I'm looking at also breach in the sense of an internal breach where perhaps maybe due to human error, someone types out information that isn't supposed to be within maybe an email, for example, and it goes and it's received to a different person, and it's the ripple effect just keeps going. So it depends on the kind of attack, right? The incident the response should be measured to the type of breach. And having that team will now help you as an SME owner understand how can I mitigate this breach? What measures will I? Because not every measure is compatible to every breach. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a thing. It's customized, right? So after you've already done so and have that team in place and put a control in place, then the next thing, of course, is to look at how to not let that happen again. Because fool me once, you can get away with it. But fool me as a business owner, if you are susceptible to or rather you're exposed to the same type of
all the time, I think I will leave them. Yeah. The customer trust goes to below zero.
Yeah, in fact, now the efforts you've made earlier, if it's something that happens now every so often, I mean, even the attackers will just be your next clients because you're feeding them. Yeah.
Could we talk about DPAs and what are the data
Processing
agreements? Yeah.
Right.
The contracts.
So this is on as far as contract management is concerned. Okay, let me give an example. I think this will be better explained in that manner. As a business owner, regardless of the field you're in or sector that you're in, you have your direct clients, right? And then you have third parties. Most businesses have third parties, and that can look like vendors, right? It can look as like suppliers. Let's say it's a hospital. Primarily a hospital is a data controller.
Yeah.
But aside from, the patients who are the data subjects, right? And aside from the employees and the staff who are data subjects as well in a different context, because those are employees, you also have vendors for medical supply. The ones who supply, you have pharmacists, right? External ones. And you're processing, you're handling information with those third parties. And that includes, personal information as well.
And sensitive
personal information in some scenarios. So if you're engaging a third party in the form of a vendor, like I've stated in the example, and that vendor has access to information that you are handling primarily, but you share it with them for purposes, perhaps not the ground for that could be performance of a contractual obligation, then they are held to also the same standard as you as a controller, because they then become processors.
Right.
So if you have that kind of an engagement with a third party that requires contractual fulfillment of a contractual obligation in that sense, that's why we talk of data sharing agreements or data transfer agreements.
Right.
Or for example, or let's say, because we have these cases going on a lot. We have a lot of Kenyans who perhaps go for cancer treatments. Let's say in India. Most of the time it's India, right? And you find that most of the times you have to transfer medical records from the hospital where they are being treated at in Kenya, for example, and have it transferred to the hospital that they'll be treated at in India. And now that will require a formal engagement between the hospital in Nairobi, for example. Let's say it's Aga Khan and the hospital in India. And now
that's where the agreements.
That's where the agreements comes, because and also part of the cross-border data transfer requirements required by the ODPC under the Act is that the measures that you have as a data controller in Kenya should be this similar. And you actually have to prove that this person you're transferring this information to has similar measures, similar controls, or they are under their own authority and they have complied.
Okay, so my question is, what if the standards I'm sending, this is cross-border transfer of data, the country X, I'm in Kenya and I'm sending data to country X. Country X doesn't have any form of data protection guidelines, policies. What happens? Who's liable if there's a breach?
Ideally, if you are supposed to notify the ODPC anytime you are sending information, personal information across the Kenya border, and I mean, if you can't do so without the ODPC's okay or go ahead or approval, yeah. So if you actually go ahead to send to, because it's highly unlikely that the ODPC would approve such a cross-border data transfer where there is no measure, there is no way of knowing or understanding whether or not there are even security measures to safeguard this information once it is on the recipient's end.
Right.
Then the liability will fall squarely on you. But where the data sharing agreements come in is, it actually shields you as an SME owner. Say, okay, if in your scenario you are held liable because you are not supposed to send out information to a state that doesn't have controls or measures. And again, you can't, if you run that by the approval of the DPC and that isn't issued, because it's likely not to be issued in such a circumstance, and you still go ahead and do so, the liability falls squarely on you as a data control. But a data handler in Kenya, processing information within Kenya,
Would it
for a
be
data subject in Kenya.
would it be higher now that it's going to be, I'm looking at cancer treatment and it's going to be sensitive personal information, so it will,
Data.
yeah,
Yeah, that can, yeah, you could, the measures for compensation in that regard would be on the punitive end of it, because that is, we've noticed that if where the information is on sensitive personal data, the ODPC is inclined to issue fines that are a bit on the heftier.
she's very generous with
She's generous with fines. Okay. Now, but
which is a good thing.
which is I believe is what it's informing and setting precedents for how SMEs, and actually making it a compliance, a mandatory compliance obligation
Not
for
a-
SMEs.
It's not a suggestion.
It's not a suggestion or a choice. It's really right now, I think more and more companies and more SMEs are actually appreciating that fact, which bodes well both for the company and also for the
Customers
as
or
well.
consumers, right? Tell us about AI and automation and data protection with regards to
Yeah, we are in the people like saying in the age of AI, but I believe AI has been with us for a long period, from from the 80s and even before then. It's just that it has continued to evolve, and now more and more, and since it's becoming more and more accessible, of course, SMEs owners are not left behind. They use AI informed models to inform perhaps how to better generate more revenue, of course, or how to better smoothly run the operations. And what I can say in that regard is, in as far as compliance with the Data Protection Act is concerned for SME owners who actually employ or design their systems that are informed by AI models, is to just to disclose that we've talked on the right of information of data subjects according to the section 26 of the Act. Your customer has a duty to have them informed that part of, perhaps maybe when you're maybe let's say it's marketing messages or promotional messages.
we get that a lot on our feeds. Yeah.
Most of the time it's AI empowered. It's automated. It's automated kind of messages, and that should also be disclosed to your customer, to your client. That's if you give us your telephone number, your email address, we shall also be sending promotional messages, or maybe sales, or maybe it's, if you're an event company, you can talk about maybe future events and so on, and also disclose that the promotional messages should be sending out are actually automated by an AI model. That helps, because I'm saying that because more and more companies do that a lot. And let's say you have a complaint or inquiry you want to make, and you can't use the automated email thread to actually make that complaint, or even make a request to access perhaps something regarding your account as a client. And maybe the AI model is not, the database that has been fed into it hasn't been informed to actually respond to inquiries as well. It's just been trained to issue out the promotional messages. That has to come out clearly in your policy. That's what I was talking about. A policy is not a one size fits all. You really have to customize it to your operation as a business, right from who you are, identify yourself as a data handler, right to now the deletion and retention policy bits. It has to be all encompassing and very comprehensive.
Tied to that, I'll go back to Vanessa Sifunjo's data protection presentation with regards to AI. And I want to know who will be sued in this instance. Is it the SME or the AI tools, the people who train the AI tools, if there's a breach?
If there's a
related to.
Like I mentioned,
who am I going to sue as a customer?
Compliance is a layered approach. Now, for if you disclose that you're using an AI model, or you're using an AI trained tool, as part of your operations as a business. You've designed it into your business.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you have put on your measures, it's a ladder. That's what I was talking of. You can't rely on third party measures.
Mm-hmm.
If it's evident that you've put in your measures, say for what the AI, how they call the controller behind the AI tool is concerned, if you've put your own measures, ideally you should be covered. The concern is then if you haven't, or if there's a gap that you haven't covered yourself within your policy or within your design process where you are embedding the AI tool into your process. If you haven't covered that gap, then you will be held liable. If you've covered the gap, then liability then reverts back to the trainer. There was the trainer of that AI will to.
Right. So on to the next question. We have about 2 to go. So how does data localization, and probably what is that, impact Kenyan startups when operating across multiple countries? I'm thinking about maybe now with we have several block tradings in Africa, the South African one, the ECOWAS, the East Africa. So probably tell us what the data localization is and how it impacts Kenyan startups. Nora.
Localization, it basically means contextualizing the provisions of the Act into the operations of your business. What that looks like is basically integrating the principles under the Act and design it into your business. Designing like from the get-go. In fact, we usually advocate for privacy by design or by default. Right from the go, embed it into your system. So
what about companies that were started way before data protection? So they have to do the reverse?
No, the Act doesn't work retrospectively, as you understand. But what is encouraged, even if, for example, let's take for example a telecommunications company, let's say Safaricom. Safaricom has been with us for decades.
Yeah.
And the Act came into 2021. So what you ideally should do is, as of if you have been in operation from way back, just look at the processing activity at least from the date when the Act came into when the Act commenced. Okay,
right.
And moving forward, if you have just started again,
I think that's a plus for you.
Yeah,
if you just started and
if you just started plan, just embed it into your system as you go. What most companies that were incorporated prior to the commencement of the Act is they had to kind of like do an auditing now with regards to the provisions of the Act. So they had to now, or the principles that we have, they had to now integrate or look at ways to integrate that now moving forward in our processing activities, because the Act doesn't work retrospectively. Is it retrospective? Retrospectively.
It's progress from the day. Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. We are getting the whole.
Yeah. So the localization bit is if you're a data controller, the information that you are processing ideally should be stored within Kenya. Ideally, it should be stored within Kenya, right? So the localization is also it speaks to data sovereignty as a state. There's a whole discussion around data sovereignty because how the question of really who owns our data. Where are data centers? Do we have one really in Kenya?
There's one in what is it called? Where people store?
Yeah, there's several data centers. I think there's only one in Africa, if I'm not wrong.
It's in Kenya or it's in South
Africa. Yeah, if I remember correct.
I was thinking of Silicon Valley. I know that. Okay, right.
So yeah, so localization also means ensure that the data collected is accessible and stored within Kenya. So what that means is you as the data controller located territorially in the country, you're answerable to what you collect, process, and store and transfer.
Now, how does that relate to a Kenyan startup that is operating across multiple countries?
that now speaks to the measures that you need to take when you transfer, personal information across the border.
Back to cross-border.
That's back to the cross-border measures that we were talking about earlier. What that means is then you need to ensure that those security safeguards when you're moving information from one institution in one state to another institution to another state, because different states have, we gladly more and more African countries or states have adopted
the Malabo Convention.
There are several countries that have ratified it. Kenya is yet to do so, but we have our own act.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to also put across is more and more African countries have adopted their own acts. Yeah, Data Protection Act. Understand Botswana in January recently, signed another act into law to kind of like replace that was there before. We have more and more are actually, I think it's only maybe 5 perhaps African countries that are yet to do so, and you find that some of them that are yet to do so are signatories to the Malabo Convention.
Yeah.
So you look at the state to which you are transferring data to. Does this country have like these measures and so on? Then you narrow it down to the data handler that you're transferring information to. Do they have the measures in place, and are they working? Because that's the other thing. You could have measures, but if they're not working, or again, you're reverting back to being successful to a data breach.
Right.
And of course, the implications that come with that.
So when a startup is scaling up very rapidly, when can they know that now this is now time to engage a professional that are dedicated data professional? In this instance, I'm looking at DPOs. Yeah. Or is there any other professional?
The indicators when you're as a business you're doing well is if you find as a business you are processing more and more data, because it goes without saying, if you're scaling up, it means you're getting more clients.
Yes.
Meaning you're processing more information, and it also means you're probably looking at you're in different parts of the world, right? Or in different parts of Africa, for example. So if a clear indicator is if you find yourself you're processing more and more information, you definitely require a department dedicated towards compliance in that regard. Because you, as a data handler, you are responsible for the information that you process. So the more the information you process, the higher the responsibility.
Right.
The other indicator is if you involve a lot of automation in processing of personal information. Automation, I mean, if you as a business, you employ a lot of AI automating tools. If you are, more and more businesses actually use automation, perhaps to inform maybe on your customers' preferences, perhaps through what digital like surveillance. More and more companies through websites they use cookies, and cookies actually do like kind of like follow through what your preferences are, and more and more businesses use that to inform their decisions.
Right.
Perhaps that can inform whether or not a product is moving as fast, for example, and so on. If you find yourself as a business that you're using more and more of such automated tools, then you definitely require a department dedicated to that to ensure that you are in compliance, because automated decisions or automated processing of data can, again, put you in a position where you will find yourself, compromised in as far as processing your personal or client information is concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
On to the last question. So what is one key piece of advice you'd give startups, probably in our audience, looking to integrate data protection from day one? I think you've talked about data by design. What's defaults and design? Yeah. So yeah, what measures, what advice would you give startups?
Let me first start by saying compliance with the Data Protection Act, it's an enabler for your business. It's not an inhibitor.
It's a hindrance.
It's not a hindrance. It's not. It's the act is not here. The authority is not here. The DPOs that we have in Kenya are not here to impose more and more obligation to hinder your business. As players in the and we work with SMEs a lot, we understand that there's so many compliance requirements for SMEs. I'm sure our viewers have seen that perhaps from the previous speakers.
Yeah.
Right from registering a company, new KRA compliance, tax and licenses and permits and so on.
Yeah.
So this is it for businesses or business owners. It may look like this is just another layer. This is just another responsibility, but look at it as an enabler for your business to grow, and not. It doesn't mean that we are constraining you as a business from selling your product or from issuing the services that you issue as a business. It's actually what will even enhance customers' trust in your business, and that will, if anything, propel it.
Right.
So the other advice I would also put out there is that start small, then scale up. People, you don't look at compliance is not a checkbox. It's not, you said policy, we have policy, tick. You said registration, registered, tick. It's more of, it's a layered approach. And it's something that you find that it doesn't happen within a specific time frame. Compliance run as long as your business runs. For example, the same way you can't say, I am compliant with the Kenya Revenue Authority, I'm tax compliant this year, so I'm good to go. It means next year you have to remain compliant as you want to run, and the following year and so on. It's the same thing with data protection. It's not any different. As long as you are processing information, you have to remain compliant. And compliance, initially at the beginning of this conversation, I called it a roadmap.
Yeah.
Meaning it's a journey. It's not an event. So you start small. Like if for example, it's on a policy, just ensure that the policy reflects the processing activity. If it's the record of processing activity, ensure that it accurately captures what information that actually passes through your hands as a company or as a business, and the security measures that you've put in place. So start small. Eventually the roadmap will play out. The more you, if for example, if you start with registration, let's say you're already registered, because I realize most SMEs think once you're registered as a business, that's it. But what they don't realize is the ODPC keeps a record of registered data handlers, meaning you're now on their map,
on their radar.
Basically, if you're already on the ODPC's radar, it basically means that you are now under their magnifying lens, meaning you are required to be in compliance with the Act. So update your policies regularly and look at compliance as an enabler, not an inhibitor. I think that I can repeat over
that one. You hammered it into that.
I'm hammering into that one.
Yeah. So in 30 seconds, please give us your closing remarks and how our beautiful audience can reach out to you in case they need even maybe directions to your office.
Right. So personal information is digital currency for your business. So dear business owners, make compliance your competitive advantage, right? Not an hindrance. That would say my panel remarks. As we mentioned before, I'm a senior partner at Giathi and Company Advocates. You can find our offices in Upper Hind, Flamingo Towers, Mara Road, Wing A on 4th floor. Ask for Georgina Giathi or Giathi. Just mention Giathi and you'll find us. You'll find your way there. Yeah.
Now, as is custom, we give our guests beautiful shirts written SMEs.
Okay.
And it has something on the back. Probably you can read it together. It says, serving you legal insights in the simplest of ways. So this goes to you.
Thank you so much.
Drumroll, let's clap. You have done well. It was a very thought-provoking, insightful conversation. I have learned a lot. I think I will go back to this video and take now notes and be on the other side. So this has been all right. This has been it for this session. We hope to see you on the next one. Bye. Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.